Hey, this is John with Two Moose Home Inspections. Welcome to the July 2021 in-service training. If you're new to our in-service trainings, then what I'll let you know is that we normally start with a brief discussion and then we move into a bunch of different issues that we found during inspections over the past month. Now, with that being said, there's a lot of information to cover, so I highly recommend that you click on the speed option and you set it to 2x because there's so much information to cover. So let's jump right into it, and we're going to go into Notion, and right here you can see for our July 2021 in-service training, the very first topic that we have is electrical loads, circuit breakers, AFCI, GFCI, and just basically having a discussion about that. So the thing about having a discussion about all of those is that first we need to understand what a circuit is. So a circuit is basically a path for electricity to go, and it completes a complete circle and is uninterrupted, and we're good to go. So let's say at your house you have a light bulb, and to turn that light bulb on and off, you have a switch. Now that switch is basically saying that electricity has a path for which that electricity can go. So right here is our path, and whenever you flip the switch to turn it off, now the electricity doesn't have a path to go. And then you turn the electricity on, and then you off, and then on. And by connecting it right here, that means that we now have a path for the electricity to go, which is a complete circuit. So our circuit breaker basically works the same way. We can go to our service panel, which is normally that big gray panel, and we can switch it to off. And whenever we switch to off, then that circuit is now turned off. And a circuit is normally more than one light. It is normally, like in a room, it might be all the lights for the kitchen. It might be all of the electrical receptacles for the kitchen, or it might be specific components like the range or the dryer or whatever it may be. And so that's what you'd be switching off with that circuit breaker. Now that circuit breaker, the thing to keep in mind is that a lot of people think, oh, well, that's there to protect me, or that's there to protect my appliances or my electronics. And that's not the case. That's not at all the case. The only purpose of that circuit breaker is to protect the wires that are inside the wall. If you've ever turned on a toaster, you can see that those electrical lines, those wires, get red hot. Now that's because there's a lot of amperage going through a very, very small wire. I mean, at least relative for its size. And so the same thing can happen inside of your walls. And so the circuit breaker, its job is to turn off if there is too much amperage. If there's more than what that wire can handle, it shuts itself off. So with that being said, let's try to understand how this works exactly. If I have a wire that is only rated for 10 amps and I throw 50 amps through it, then what's going to happen is that wire is going to melt off that protective coating, and then it's just going to get red hot, and then it's going to catch everything inside of the wall on fire, which means the house. So one of the ways that I like to think about these things is I like to think about it in the idea of the interaction that a bartender would have with a person. And so basically, at my bar, I'm going to be the bartender, and all of my patrons, if they want to, are allowed to smoke cigarettes. Normally, they're very responsible. They smoke their cigarettes. Everything's good to go. But then the problem is that if they get overloaded, meaning if they get too intoxicated, then they might pass out and their cigarette may fall onto the floor and catch my entire establishment on fire. And so what happens is that I know my customers, and I know that Billy Bob over here, he can only have beer. And so if I give him on this circuit right here, I say, here's beer, here's money to me. I give you beer, you give me money. I give you beer, you give me money. And so then what happens is we've now created a circuit. Me and Billy Bob have a circuit, and that's fantastic because if I give him beer, he gives me money. Now the thing is, I know that his circuit can only handle light beer. Great. So if one day Billy Bob asks to have a handle of whiskey, I would say, no, I'm cutting you off. We're done. I don't know what's going on here, but I'm cutting you off because that's going to overload you, and then you're going to drop your cigarette on the floor and you're going to catch my entire establishment on fire. That's basically the way that it works with a circuit breaker. So then we have two other things, and what they are is we have a GFCI and an AFCI. GFCI stands for Ground Fault Circuit Interrupter, and AFCI stands for Arc Fault Circuit Interrupter. So what do those terms mean? Ground fault means that in that electrical circuit, some of that electricity is going to ground. And what does it mean going to ground? It doesn't mean actually to the ground. It means returning to the source on a path that it was not intended. I think that's a pretty good way to think of it. The other one is AFCI, Arc Fault Circuit Interrupter. That means that electricity is jumping from one conductor over to the other, which is obviously not great. So if we put this back into that bar example, what happens? Well, what's our circuit? Our circuit is I give you beer, you give me money. I give you beer, you give me money. I give you beer, you give me money. That is our circuit. So GFCI, how does this work? I give you beer, you don't give me money, I stop giving you beer. That's basically the way that it works. And so then what's happening here? Well, what that means is that maybe we have somebody who is outside and they're using an electric string trimmer, but it's raining. And so now all the rain is falling down onto them and they have an extension cord going back to the house that they're using and they're still cutting. And then boom, electricity goes from their string trimmer through their hands, through their body, to their feet, and into the ground. And that's the way that it makes its path back. Now, we have lost some amount of electricity in this circuit, meaning I gave you beer and you didn't give me enough money. And since you didn't give me enough money, we're done. And so then I, within 200 milliseconds, should cut you off and not give you any more electricity. Now, the difference between being shocked and being electrocuted is that if you're electrocuted, you can't tell your friends because you're dead. If you're shocked, it just hurts and you can tell people about it. So we want to make sure that with a GFCI that you're just getting shocked. So whenever we test our GFCIs, we're testing to make sure that it's less than 200 milliseconds to make sure that you are safe. So let's talk about arc fault circuit interrupters. Let's say that there is a picture frame and you want to hang that picture frame and you hammer that picture frame into the wall and you didn't notice, but there was a wire and you just nicked that wire. So that nail went straight through that wire and you just nicked it. Now, the electricity still wanted to get back to the source, but it didn't want to get back to the source through you because that's super inefficient. So now it's just kind of like arcing. It's jumping between those 2 points and it's just jumping and it's acting a little funny. So if we take that back into the bar example, then what's happening is that I give you beer, you give me money, I give you beer, you give me money. I give you beer and you start acting a little funny. I don't know what it is. It's just it's something's weird, okay? You're just acting a little funny. So I'm just going to cut you off. We're done. All right, you're acting weird, we're done. And that's the easiest way to think about it is that we have a bartender that makes sure people don't get overloaded. We have a bartender to make sure that they always get their money or else they don't give them any of the beer. And then we have bartenders that are watching their patrons and they're making sure that, hey, you don't seem right. I'm going to cut you off. No more beer for you. And what's interesting is there are two different types of AFCI breakers. So they're called combo units, where basically there's two different ways in which we could detect that arcing. And so we have two different types of arc fault circuit interrupters. So that's a combo AFCI, and then we have a GFCI, and then we also have the circuit breaker. So there's basically 4 forms of protection depending on the type of breaker that you install. And so that's like the general idea of what we were talking about with circuit breakers, and one of the ways in which you can describe it. You can apply it to anything that you can think of, but basically I think for me that's the easiest way to understand that we have a circuit, we have a transaction where I give you something, you give me something in return. And that right there is how the circuit works. Now keep in mind that that's basically describing a DC circuit. Keep in mind that we are doing AC, so it's an alternating current as opposed to a direct current, but the idea is still exactly the same. And so in your house, it's always recommended that you update your circuit breakers. I think that the manufacturer says within like 40 or 45 years, you should replace all of your circuit breakers. And what I'd highly recommend is that if you are moving into a house, just spend the $300 on parts and then however much it's going to cost for an electrician to come in and replace all of your circuit breakers, to make them safer. Now, not every circuit breaker has to be AFCI and GFCI and all of that, but it does really help for areas where there may be water. Because again, if you have water and let's say you're straightening your hair in the bathtub, well, that's probably not the best place to do that. And so we want to have a GFCI protector on there. And so that's basically that. I think in other terms, we also talked about service panels during the time that we had our meeting together. And in that service panel, we're talking about tandem breakers where instead of just having one breaker per slot, you have 2 breakers per slot. And some service panels are able to handle that and other service panels are not able to handle that. And so it just totally depends. But yeah, so let's go ahead and we're going to move back into Notion. All right, so we're back into Notion and what we have going on is we're looking right here at a dryer vent that is disconnected. Now that dryer vent is disconnected inside of a crawl space. What that means is that all that hot, humid air is going into the crawl space, which could definitely cause some issues like mold. Additionally, if we're putting all that dryer lint down there, oh my gosh, the mice are gonna be so happy. They're gonna have all this new nesting material. It's gonna be great. But it also looks like there's a whole bunch of dryer lint that's stuck inside of there. And if that's the case, that dryer lint could be a fire hazard. So we definitely wanna get that cleaned out so that way we don't have any issues into the future. So moving on, we have the deck, and this deck is wonderful. What I love about this is that we normally say, hey, what we need you to do is put on a fresh coat of paint, put on a fresh coat of protectant, because all of that stuff prevents the wood from rotting out as quickly as it otherwise would. And what's so great about this, you can actually see it. I was hoping I had a bigger picture, but I do not. But if you see right here, this is actually the ground underneath the deck. You can fall straight through this deck. And really we need some of that walking surface replaced for sure. That's why it's in red. All right, so we have a cracking asphalt driveway. So this cracking asphalt driveway, so that's extremely common. It's one of those things. But where we live, we have some very severe freeze-thaw cycles. And what that means is if we have a crack and we get some water in there, then that water is going to expand and then more water is going to get in and it's going to expand, and then more water is going to get in and it's going to expand. So every time that it freezes and thaws, we are damaging our driveway. So we want to make sure that we're putting a sealant on top of all of that. Now, sometimes if the driveway has cracks that are too big, then we actually need to seal it in a different way, not just putting like a roll-on or paint-on kind of sealant. What we actually need to do is we need to go in and we need to patch holes, or we need to fill in sections with either tar or an asphalt repair kit or whatever. So just keep an eye on how big those cracks are, but they're extremely common and definitely expected. So if we take a look here, we have a roof covering and it's called shiny shingles. Oh man, what is shiny shingles? So basically shiny shingles just means that whenever you're looking at the shingles, they look shiny. And so what happens is, normally a shingle is made, and this is very, very basic terms, but you have asphalt, then you have fiberglass, then you have asphalt, and then you have all the granules sprinkled on top of it. So what does that mean, the granules? That is basically, it looks like sandpaper, right? It's all the little pieces of sand or whatever that gives all the color, the texture, everything like that. It also helps to protect the shingle. Now, if those granules are lost over time, then what's going to happen is that the asphalt is going to become basically damaged, and it's going to start to expose all of the fiberglass threads, and all those fibers are going to then be exposed, and through capillary action or whatever are going to suck in water, and then with our freeze-thaw cycles, it's going to break away more of those granules, it's going to break away more of that asphalt, and it's going to expose more of those fiberglass fibers. And what's going to happen is it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And the more that it happens, the worse it gets. And then it'll happen even more. And then the worse it'll get. So it gets a little out of control quickly. So that's normally a first indicator that it's time to start thinking about replacing the shingles. Not that you have to replace the shingles. It's just time to start thinking about it. Now, this window is pretty interesting. And what's interesting about this window is that you see that we have that protectant coating that is basically failed. So whether it was a polyurethane or it was some kind of varnish or it was something, but basically a polyurethane, that it has failed. So if we take a look at this window, why is it failing? And so what we can see here at the window is that it could be that water is coming in from the outside. It could be that you have ski boots, snowboard boots, or boots from, removing snow, and you're setting them here on the floor, and then that is causing water to come into these wooden features. Or it could be that we have a very hot inside house and a very cold window that is touching the outside, and we're getting condensation on that window. And that condensation is coming down, and then it is getting water all onto this wood, which has caused all that damage. Basically, we need to figure out, is the water coming from the outside or is the water coming from the inside? If it's the outside, there's some steps that we can do. If it's the inside, then we need to figure out why that's happening. Maybe we don't need to be running the humidifier in the middle of the winter, or maybe we need to do something to make sure that we aren't putting our boots where they go, maybe getting a tray that the boots are supposed to go into. So the next thing is oven range, and the burners will not ignite. And so if the burners won't ignite, there's a couple of reasons why that could happen. We can have carbon deposits, we can have food deposits, we can have a bad valve, we can have a bad igniter. There's a whole bunch of things that can go wrong. But one of the most common things that I'd highly recommend that you check is that you want to take off that grill, and then you want to just rotate, just ever so slightly rotate the ceramic pieces until they line up and drop in exactly where they're supposed to be. Because if we're having an issue where the components are basically not lined up the way they should, then the gas is not going to come in and then go out the way that it's supposed to. And so then that means the igniter may not work, and that also just means that the gas is not being directed in a way that'll allow it to burn effectively. So it could be that we need to replace some components, it could be that the appliance is bad, or it could just be that whoever reinstalled the things after cleaning didn't put them back together the way they're supposed to. So the next thing is water supply. The filter is dirty. Now this filter here is a sediment filter, and the purpose of this sediment filter is just to get rid of any large particles. That would be, again, if you're pulling groundwater, that would be any kind of dirt or sand or any other kind of debris that would be inside that water pipe before it gets to our faucets, before it gets to anything else that that may not allow those little pieces of debris to come to flow through. And so the thing is that this is not a filter that is used to make sure your drinking water is safe to drink. It only gets rid of any of these large pieces of sediment. And so whenever you take ownership of the house, I highly recommend that you replace this filter. I recommend that you replace the filter in your HVAC system. I recommend that you replace the water filter in your refrigerator, that you replace all these maintenance items that you're supposed to do annually. So that way you can say, oh yeah, on the day that I purchased the house, I replaced all of these filters, which means that whenever that month comes around, it's time for me to do that year and year and year again. And so that way, every year you're doing what you need to do. That's the way to get it done. All right, so this particular thing here not 100% if it is connected or not. You can see we have the black wires and the white wires up at the top there. And then if you take a look, these right here are fuses. And so then these fuses, they don't necessarily look like they're connected to anything. Like down here at the bottom, it doesn't really look like it's connected to anything at all. And so with these fuses, the way that a fuse works, remember we were talking about a circuit breaker that it will shut off before any of the wires get too hot. Well, inside of here, you have a wire, and whenever that wire gets too hot, then the wire will break. And so whenever that wire breaks, what's happening is that you then have to unscrew, just like a light bulb, that fuse and then screw it back in. So whenever you do that, then we're good to go. So they've basically put a sacrificial piece of wire that will basically just break whenever it gets too hot. And that's all well and good, and that's pretty easy to understand, except do you see some of the issues that we have with this particular unit? Now, again, I don't know if it's connected or not at the top, but down here it looks like it's disconnected. But can you see how I could just reach out and grab almost anything, and then that would cause me to be more than likely electrocuted? So we just want to make sure that anytime that we have exposed electrical conductors, that they are covered up, whether it be inside of a junction box, whether it be to have a proper cover on things. We really want to make sure that people are safe. And so to that point, what we can see is that right here we are missing filler plates. And filler plates basically are little plastic things that you can just pop right into place. And what they do is they will prevent me from being able to take my hands and stick them inside of that electrical panel, because I do not want to stick my hands inside of that electrical panel because I will be electrocuted. So to make things safer, I think you need on this particular unit maybe 5. And so with that being said, you have 5 filler plates that you need to put in there. Okay, great. I'm going to put in 5 filler plates. And how much is that going to cost me? Oh, $5. Hey, that's a good deal. I like it. So to keep me and my family safe, $5, I'm definitely going to do it. Let's talk about a $2 fix that can keep you and your family safe. You see this receptacle right here? Well, this is actually a GFCI receptacle, so I lied to you and my apologies. This is a $15 replacement. So this GFCI receptacle, you can see that it has been physically damaged. You can also see that I can just take my hand and I can just stick it right into that opening there. If I can stick my hand into that opening, then I can have myself a very, very bad time. And so we just want to make sure that we're spending the money to make sure that our house is as safe as we can possibly make it, because electricity is no joke. Electricity is a major killer, and we just need to be sure that we are 100% safe. So on the exterior here, there is a faucet, and the faucet is not freeze proof. So again, in our area, what happens is that all of the water is coming and it's compacted up to where this valve is. Now, if this valve assembly gets cold, then the pipe is going to expand and then it's going to burst. And then all of that water is going to relentlessly come out and flood my entire house, which is not great. So what I have to do is, before the start of the winter, I need to remember to turn off the valve inside the house, open this up, let all the water drain out, and then we should be good to go. Now, if I don't want to go through all those steps of doing all that, what I could have done is I could have installed a freeze-proof hose, spigot, bib, whatever you want to call it, and that thing there will install. And what happens is where I turn the valve assembly isn't located right where that valve is. The valve assembly is actually 12 inches away, and a rod is connecting into that valve assembly. So whenever I open and close the valve, I have 12, 16 inches, whatever it may be, of space where all of this here is free of water. And not until I turn the valve does the valve open over here to allow the water to come through. And the benefit of that is that my wall is going to be about this thick, and then I have this much extra to where the valve head is. And then what happens there is that now the inside can stay nice and warm, the outside can go ahead and freeze because there's no water in it. And that means that I can still use those connections during the winter time without having to worry about shutting off water or causing anything to freeze. It's a very, very, very cool product. And in this area, at this elevation, highly recommended that every house has that. All right, so trees too close to the foundation. Now I got a really good close-up of this particular one. And what we have going on is that we have this tree, and it's actually right now they've had to modify a part of the house to allow the tree to fit in. Now, the thing about trees is that the tree, you know that whenever the wind blows, that tree is going to sway at the top. Now, the thing about it is that yes, the tree is swaying at the top, but the tree is also swaying at the bottom. And that little bit of movement is going to apply a pressure onto the house. And that is going to cause damage to the walls. It's going to cause damage to the ceiling. It could even cause, I mean, with how close it is to the foundation, you better believe that those tree roots are causing damage to the foundation. There's just no reason to have a tree this close. Now, I understand it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, you love the way that it is. That's all well and good, but then you got to give the tree space. You have to give the tree space, because as that tree moves, the tree is going to be moving back and forth regardless of what you put into it or put around it, because you have to figure that with a big enough lever, you can move the world, right? Well, a 70-foot lodgepole pine, I think, is pretty much big enough that if I put any non-compliant structure here, that non-compliant structure is going to break. That's just what's going to happen. That's just the facts. So if we then take a look, we have this receptacle here, and the thing about it is that they have a wonderful weatherproof cover, and that weatherproof cover is perfect. It's going to prevent any weather from getting into where that receptacle is. Oh, wait, but behind the weatherproof receptacle is where we're actually getting water coming back in and inside. Now, here's the scary thing, is that this is GFCI protected. But just because it's GFCI protected does not mean that the wires that are currently exposed are GFCI protected, because that GFCI protection is from where the receptacle gives that electricity, where you plug in at. It is checking both of those parts of the plug to say, how much beer am I giving you? How much money are you giving me back? And within 200 milliseconds, if that is not doing the way that it should, then it's just going to shut it off. Okay, great. But what happens if water gets back behind there? And whenever water gets back behind there, what happens if like snow or ice or something like that builds up and makes direct contact with those electrical conductors? Well, then the GFCI means nothing, and it's not going to do anything to protect anybody from anything. And so that's why, again, I highly recommend that you have GFCI breakers installed in your service panel, and that you don't rely on these receptacles that easily could fail. Each one of them could fail so easily. That's why I highly recommend having a GFCI breaker back at the service panel to protect against issues like this. So if we move on, what we'll see here, there is some patching present on the walls, and then also the picture that is depicted right here, you can see that there's kind of a sag to the paint. And that's because water has gotten behind that paint and started to pull the paint down. And so you can see we have our thermal camera here. We also do moisture meter, and that basically just tells us that that there is no water presently back there. So it's an inactive leak. But it's still interesting as to why it is the way that it is. So if we take a look at this exposed wiring right here on the exterior, so there's some wiring going into a conduit. Now, imagine I have my string trimmer and I'm coming through and I'm getting rid of all the weeds. It's very probable that that string trimmer could come down and that it could cut into those wires that are underneath in where that conduit is. And so the thing to keep in mind here is that I could, make the conduit longer, but the easiest thing to do, come over, put 6 inches of topsoil right on top of there. And whenever you put that 6 inches of topsoil, you're gonna be so pleased with yourself, because that 6 inches is gonna compact down to like maybe 3.5, and you won't have to worry about extending that conduit. That is the easiest, least expensive way that you can possibly protect those wires from any kind of physical damage from like a string trimmer or whatever it may be. So then as we move on, we have this water pipe that's unsupported, and this one's a riot. I love it. So basically, you need to make sure that that you are always supporting pipes appropriately. So if we take a look at this pipe right here, so it's this little bottom section right here, and it goes all the way over that direction. And the thing about it is that we have a bunch of water, which has a lot of weight, plus the weight of the pipe, and all of that over a span of 20 feet is just pulling down. And what you might notice is that, the pipe can handle it. I know the pipe can handle it, but where the fittings are, each one of these fittings is rigid. And so what will happen is where the pipe actually makes its connection, that is where we are going to have a leak spring up. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different ways in which we can have this particular thing leak because we didn't have the pipe properly supported. And if it's not properly supported, then that's bad, and we need to make sure that all of our plumbing pipes are supported. That includes natural gas, that includes drainage, that includes supply, and we need to make sure that all of our electrical wires are supported, because any of those things can be easily damaged if they're allowed to just hang under the burden of their own weight, which is normally pretty severe. All right, so baseboard heater not working. We tested at the thermostat. Either it works at the thermostat or it doesn't work at the thermostat. If it doesn't work at the thermostat, we are not going to go any further into it to figure out, is a circuit breaker tripped? Is there a special switch located under the closet's, left shelf, third one down? No, it's just, does it work at the thermostat? Yes or no? And that's all we care about. So next, crack in the shower floor. Whenever your shower floor has a crack and you stand on the shower floor, that crack is going to basically get larger, and that means that the water is then going to go through that shower floor. And so we just want to make sure that that if there is a crack, that we're either replacing that entire pan or somehow we're sealing it. But again, if it's fiberglass, that fiberglass, once it loses its ability to support itself, then it's done, and it's just time to replace that whole pan. And that is a pain in the butt, because a lot of times you have to replace all the tile and everything. So it's kind of a big deal. All right, these stairs, Wow, cool. So there are limitations to how tall a stair can be. There's also limitations to the difference of heights of different stairs. Everything needs to be uniform so you can easily walk up them. And if you take a look at this, this is just wild. And I understand why it's done. I get it, but like, golly, that's just an injury waiting to happen. And so again, if let's say this comes out to be 4 stairs, then you're definitely going to want to put a railing in. If it's less than 4 stairs, then you don't have to put a railing in. But wouldn't it just be nice to have a railing? I think it'd be nice to have a railing. So whatever you can do to keep yourself safe, right? All right, the next thing that we have going on is that we have a whole bunch of trash. Now, it costs money and it takes time to get rid of trash. So we want to make sure that you are aware of this so that way you and your realtor can put into the contract that the seller will either get rid of the trash or they'll give you some sort of a credit for you to get rid of their trash. Something along those lines, because whenever you have a significant amount of trash at the house, that's like so disheartening right after you buy a house. And it's like, well, all right, I guess our next 2 weekends are shot as we're trying to get rid of this trash, and it's filthy and disgusting. And there could be a lot of health hazards, like hantavirus whenever it comes to like mice and their droppings. Like you got to be careful whenever it comes to trash around a house. All right, on this particular window, there are normally these tabs that you can push in, and then that allows you to bring the window back towards you so you can kind of clean the window, or if you need to then, remove the window from the sash, you can do all of that. And so basically, this, I think you just need to unscrew these 2 Phillips head screws, and you can replace that piece. But if you don't, the window could fall in. I think somebody just bumped into the window, causing it to break that one little piece of plastic. So next thing is water damage to the support post. And so whenever you have a support post, you want to make sure that there is a way for water to get away from wooden components. And so a lot of times what you'll see is that you will have a support post that is elevated on top of something, instead of having it just down into the ground. Because if it's down into the ground like this, then that means that moisture can be trapped. So we'll normally put something to elevate that post. So that way it would be a piece of metal. You don't necessarily want to put it directly onto concrete because that concrete can actually move moisture up into the wood. But it's the end grain that you really have to watch out for. Wood is like a vampire. After death, it's still sucking. And so you got to be really, really careful with wood, because if anything gets into that end grain, it's going to suck up all of that water. And whenever it does that, it's going to basically pop off or remove all of that protectant, and because of that, then it's going to expose itself to all kinds of like damage from UV or from anything else. And you really got to be extra careful whenever it comes to that. So moving on, this boiler right here has oxygen permeable tubing, and I think that we have another example of this a little bit further on. And oxygen permeable tubing basically means that oxygen can get into that pipe. And if you know anything about oxidation and cast iron, or just metal in general, that oxidation will cause corrosion, and then that corrosion will cause failure. And so this was obviously an issue that has hopefully been corrected into the future. Companies are aware of oxygen permeability. They understand what it is that's going on. They understand the molecular side of what's happening in their boilers and in their heating systems. But what I would say here is that we can fix this in one of 3 ways. 1, we can ignore it. Okay, maybe that's not really a fix. Number 2, we can use a stainless steel heat exchanger. So we can install a heat exchanger that will basically separate or isolate my cast iron boiler from the rest of the oxygen permeable tubing. And so then that way I don't have, that oxidation can happen, but it's not going to affect my stainless steel heat exchanger. And it's not going to affect my cast iron boiler because they are now separate. Or the other option is, whenever it's time to replace that boiler, replace it with a boiler that is that has a heating element or built-in heat exchanger that is made out of stainless steel. And then you don't have to worry about oxygen permeability. So moving on. This flue corrosion at base. What you can't see is that this is a massive, massive flue. And you could literally put your fist inside of this flue. And the problem then is, whenever you're running the flue, you are supposed to get some amount of draft that is sucking everything up. But let's say something happens and you aren't getting the proper draft and whatever, then this is the best way for your entire family to die from carbon monoxide poisoning. So let's let that sink in for a minute. And on this particular one, the individual, we inspected the house, and then the individual taped over top of this with tape, and it was foil tape. And then they were hoping that a different inspection company who didn't already inspect their house wouldn't notice. And it's like, man, replace the metal flue. You're going to kill somebody. Just replace the metal flue. That might have been a soapbox. It wasn't as bad as last month, but that's still a soapbox. Just if you know it's right and you know that it'll save lives, just do the right thing. That's all you got to do. All right, I'm done. I'm moving on. I'm good with it. All right, we're going on. So next thing's next. So this particular light is no longer secured up into the ceiling. The problem is that could basically pull off or get damaged in some way that would make those electrical conductors exposed, which could cause a shock, fire, electrocution, whatever it may be. So just get that fixed up. All right, so your hot tub's damaged. That sucks. So the problem with hot tubs is that they are prone to so much damage being in the environment that we are in. In a high alpine environment, man, there is just so much working against your hot tub. Now, the cool thing is I think this hot tub's actually fixable. It basically has like a tongue and groove kind of setup, and you can probably put that back together in a meaningful way that looks pretty good. So that's why it's not like a major issue. But man, some of these hot tubs that we've seen just get totally damaged. And if a GFCI breaker trips in the middle of winter and the hot tub is full of water, we've come to hot tubs that are completely just one big ice cube. And that hot tub at that point is done. There's nothing else that can happen with that hot tub. It just needs to be replaced. So yeah, keep an eye on your hot tub. All right. A lot of these things, same with like casement windows and other things like that, you have a handle that can come loose. And that's because there's a little set screw and you need a small little special screwdriver just to be able to tighten it up. So if it falls off like that, you might have to buy a replacement set screw, which you can buy at hardware stores. And you want to just make sure that we don't get any kind of damage to the hardware. Like, so the handle could fall off and be damaged. The handle could fall off and be lost. There's a million different things. We just want to make sure that we get that set screw. If you got a tiny Phillips head screwdriver, you can get that set screw in there. Sometimes they're hex, whatever it may be. All right, so on this fireplace, there were a lot of issues, but one of the issues that I wanted to pull out was that the damper door was missing. Now, you might see in the picture right up here that the damper door is not missing. It's still there, but actually what is missing is the linkage that is connecting the damper door to everything else, which is why the damper door is not actually installed where and how it's supposed to be. So moving on, we have crack, grout, and sealant present. So what I like is in this picture right here, let me just bring it down just a little bit here. So in this picture right here, you can see right about where my hand is touching that if I was water, I could go into that area. That is our fill spout for the bathtub. And so we want to put caulking around that, and we don't want to complete the circle. We just want to go from the top and then get about 90%, because if water does get down there, we don't want it to just fill up and then damage our wall. We want it to be able to come out that little opening and back into the shower area. So you want to just wrap that about 90%, leave a little bit of space for water to come back out if it were to get trapped back there. And same thing with the corners. You just want to fill in the corners to make sure that water doesn't go where it's supposed to. So this was interesting. This was an afterthought, and this is a wood storage shed that is physically attached to the house. And what happened was they built this wall, and so the wall that we have right up over here was basically built and at the very top picture. And what happened was that they filled it up with wood, and so the same thing. If you were to take sand and you were to just let sand go, the sand is going to make a natural pile just like this. And the same thing happens with wood. Wood is going to make a natural pile just like this. And what that means is that any wood that I stack outside of this pile is actually pushing up against that wall or wanting to fall off the pile to get into this perfect little triangle here. And so what happens, or what has happened here, is that it actually started to pull away from the house. And so then they ended up getting all of these, braided steel cables and then tensioners, but the tensioners weren't designed for the amount of weight that was pulling. And did it damage the house? No, the house was okay. But you just need to be mindful that the shed probably needs a little bit of additional support, an additional bit of TLC. All right. So again, we talked about ground fault circuit interrupters. If the ground fault circuit interrupter trips, and it takes more than 200 milliseconds, well, then that's a problem. So we definitely want to make sure that we have our ground fault circuit interrupters tripping fast enough so that way we get a shock and not an electrocution. Easy fix, just replace the GFCI receptacles. All right, let's talk about smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. We got to put them in the places where somebody's going to be asleep. We need to put them in bedrooms. We need to put them in hallways. We need to put them in living spaces. Just pretty please. It's a very, very, very small investment, and it could save your family's life. So, all right, shower, hair in the drain. Normally we don't care about this, but there was so much hair in this drain. It was ridiculous how much hair was in this drain. It was just too much. All right, moving on. In this bedroom, they basically put a bunch of bunk beds into this space, but the problem is that the space did not have proper egress. And so what that means is there was no window to escape. There was no door to the outside to escape. I think the fastest path that you could go was through 2 doors and 1 window in order to escape. or one door, a set of stairs, and then a garage door or a window in the garage to escape. And it just wasn't safe. So, why is it in red? It's in red because if you didn't know any better, you could put small children in here. And in the case of a fire and emergency, which more than likely will never happen, but if it does happen, you just got to make sure you're safe. You got to make sure you're taking care of kids and family. All right, this boiler was made in 1996. And so this is basically getting past its design life. And so 25 years is pretty much the standard for what you would expect on a boiler. Now, just because the boiler is past its design life, does that mean that it's done? That you need to buy a brand new one? Heck no. Run it till it stops working. That's what I say. Let it keep going until it's too expensive to repair and it's just better to replace. Because again, just because a manufacturer says, we'll cover it under warranty for this amount of time, and we recommend, this amount of time that you use it, you can have boilers that last 50 years, no problem. But it just depends on the boiler, and it depends on how well you take care of the boiler, and it depends on what replacement parts you put in the boiler. So this particular one being past its design life, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that if you're buying a home, you need to be aware that, hey, you might have a $15,000 repair coming up pretty soon. Just be mindful of it. Start budgeting now. That's basically what that's all about. This house was very weird. So Jeremy did this house, and whenever I came over to the house, because he's like, John, there's just something weird. I go in and I start smelling, and I can smell natural gas like a son of a gun. There is so much natural gas. It is ridiculous. And it's so weird because you only smell it whenever you go down into the basement. All right, cool. So then you're trying to find the thing, because again, your nose can find, 1 part per million. And that's basically what your nose can detect. And you have to get to like 50,000 parts per million before it's combustible. And then once you get to like 150 or 170 parts per million, then it's no longer combustible. But the thing is, we looked and looked and looked, and it wasn't the boiler. It wasn't whatever. We couldn't smell it outside. It was so weird. We could only smell it in this one area, but then like if we really smelled, we couldn't smell it. But then if we walked away and came back, then you could. So it was very minor. But here's oh shoot, it's a soapbox. Darn it. All right, well, we're getting into it. So we contacted the listing agent, because obviously if you have the smell of natural gas inside the house, that's a pretty serious problem. And that's because natural gas can be combustible. And so we called them and we said, hey, just so you know, we're smelling natural gas and this, that, the other. Anyway, they went in to inform us that, well, yeah, we knew that there was natural gas. Yeah, we definitely smelled that smell about 3 days ago. We got the utility company out there. The utility company took a look at it. They weren't really able to find where it was. They did verify that it was natural gas, but they couldn't really find the source, this, that, the other, so on and so forth, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. So why didn't you disclose this to the seller? Why? If you know that there's natural gas inside of the house, if you know that there's a leak, if you know the utility company can't find it, why didn't you disclose it to the seller? Why? I have a theory here. And just hear me out. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm not saying anything. But what I am saying is that as soon as you don't disclose something in the seller's disclosure, you lose all trust with the buyer. All the trust is gone. There's no trust. Now here's the deal. If I don't trust you and you say, yeah, they weren't able to find the source and the utility company just left with the smell of natural gas inside the house because they couldn't find the source, so they just left, but there's natural gas in the house. It's been verified. Okay. And they didn't find the source and they just left. Okay. So I already don't trust you because you didn't tell me about it in the disclosure. I already don't trust you because you didn't warn me or the home inspector or anybody that was entering the house up front that there was a natural gas leak inside the house. Okay, so I don't trust you. So how about this for a theory? You are not responsible to repair any natural gas issue up to the meter. Any natural gas issue after the meter is completely the responsibility of the homeowner. And so then what that means is maybe it was an expensive repair. Maybe the utility company found where the leak was and then gave you, information about how to repair it. You got a quote and you found out that was extremely expensive. So then you just crossed your fingers and you hoped, maybe this buyer didn't notice that there was a natural gas smell. Maybe it was faint enough that they weren't able to detect it. And then what happened is that I didn't want to pay for the repair. I just wanted to sell this house. I, as a realtor, wanted to make my commission. I, as a seller, wanted to make my money. And is there anything wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. But as I said in last month's in-service training, if you come to a transaction with integrity and you say, there is a leak, we could not find the leak, but there's a leak, sorry. Not going to do anything about it. Not going to help you with any money or payments or whatever. I'm good with that. That's perfect. If you said that there is a leak, we found the leak and we don't want to repair it, I'm good with that. I'm perfect. But if you say nothing and then I find it and then I come to find out that you knew about it and you didn't, from a health safety standpoint, tell somebody entering a house that there's a natural gas leak that has been verified by a utility company, you gotta be kidding me. You gotta be kidding me. Anyway, that's my soapbox. We did 2 soapboxes today. I'm only supposed to do 1. I'm gonna get yelled at or something. Anyway, long story short, integrity above all. That's pretty much all I can say on that one. All right, moving on. This deck is not safe. You need to replace it. So why is this deck not safe? You need to replace it. Well, I got a whole bunch of images to say so. But basically, right here is a good example. The deck is not only falling off of the house, but it is completely like leaning down because of all the issues that are going on. This particular house, unfortunately, was in disrepair. And it was quite unfortunate. But anyway, long story short, the deck is just not safe. This is the easiest way to say it's disconnecting from the house. Its footings are sinking and there's just a bunch of issues going on. So right here, poor quality repair. Nobody's going to be able to tell you this was a good quality repair, that's for sure. So if there was a repair, why is there a repair? Well, it looks as if there was a leak because you can see in the picture directly above me, there is some brand new PEX pipe with shark bite fittings. Now, I have nothing against shark bite fittings. They are really, really good, but I'll tell you what, it's not necessarily the most professional repair. It almost seems like a homeowner repair, but sometimes shark bite is the only viable option because of being able to fit tools and costs and expense. Yeah, all of that. The next thing is, just fix the hole in the wall. If you would have fixed the hole in the wall, nobody would have known that you had made a repair. But now there's been a repair and you didn't disclose it. And that goes back up to the other topic that we were just talking about. So moving on, we have a buildup of lint. Whenever there's a whole bunch of lint and it's clogged the entire thing, that's bad for reasons we talked about already. We just don't want to have any kind of fire issues. That's for sure. All right, this fireplace, not safe. So we'd already known that the fireplace was not safe and we documented, why the fireplace was not safe. What I absolutely love is whenever we also from a service provider have a note that says that it is not safe. And I'm like, yes, validation. What we thought is 100% accurate and correct. So that's always a good thing. Now, this house here had a terrible smell of animal urine. It was so pungent, so strong, that you just, as you're breathing in, you just got this heaviness in your chest. This takes the cake. This is the worst smelling house that I've ever been in. And I mean, if you figure that we do several hundred houses per year and we've been doing this since 2018, I mean, come on. This literally was the worst smelling house that I've ever been in. That whole carpet's going to need to be replaced and the subfloor is going to need to have some type of either like kills or some other thing that is going to basically, seal all of that into the wood because, oh my gosh, it was so bad. So anchoring inadequate. So this particular property here, nothing was properly secured. We had we had just logs that were used for support for this deck. We had really big timbers that were in support of the deck, and they were on just like pavers. And whenever you kick the vertical posts, they moved. And whenever a vertical post moves, that's not good. You definitely don't want that to be the case. So anyway, moving on, stucco cracks and damage. This is actually the same house, and I have never seen damage like this. So if we take a look at this particular picture, you can see all the damage and holes and patchwork that has been done. This is everything that's been patched up. But what's crazy is that whenever you look closely, this is what the damage looked like. It's almost as if somebody just took like, I don't know, maybe like a golf club or something and just started smacking the crap out of this house. All over the house, the entire house, and anywhere that you could reach swinging a golf club had damage like this. I mean, I have no other way of explaining it other than somebody vandalized the house. That's the best I can figure. All right, we were talking about egress. Now, this particular bedroom has proper egress, which is great. So in case of an emergency, you can, oh, wait, they put furniture in front of the window. Whenever you put furniture in front of the window, that negates any property that the window can give you for safety and health and escape and whatever. And come on. So this room probably shouldn't have a bunk bed. And if it does, it shouldn't be oriented the way that it is because we need to make sure that if there is a fire, people can get out safely, quickly, so on and so forth. Remember I said that I love notes. So this particular note was in a trash compactor. And this note basically just says that the trash compactor doesn't work. And I like that because they're honest. They say, hey, this doesn't work. And I say, hey, this doesn't work. And nobody is surprised about the outcome. I absolutely love it. So the next thing is oxygen permeable tubing. So this rubber here was actually made by Goodyear. So like the Goodyear tire company made the rubber that went into these pipes, and there was this huge lawsuit, billions of dollars, whatever, oxygen permeable tubing. So if you remember what we said before, you can get a stainless steel heat exchanger, you can get a stainless steel boiler, or you can just ignore it until things break. So totally up to you what you want to do, but this is just another version of an oxygen permeable tube. So this was really interesting. We have a very good home building company here. They build very premium houses, houses that very frequently win awards. Like we have our Parade of Homes, and so the Parade of Homes basically is a way for these builders to showcase, all the builders in the county to showcase these beautiful, gorgeous houses that they made. And so this company is a very frequent Parade of Homes winner. And they gave me a call and they're like, hey, John, we have this roof vent. We think the water is coming from the roof vent, but we don't know. We've basically, on this last rainstorm, flooded out our entire downstairs thing that was under construction. And, we can tear out the walls and we can do whatever, but we're looking to save tens of thousands of dollars. Can you help us out? So that's exactly what we did. And went out there with the sewer scope and got it. And right at this one elbow, we have this crack in this joint. So the water was rushing down, and then right where this 90-degree bend is, it was just the water was hitting right into this crack, and then following the pipe the rest of the way down, and then it was flooding that downstairs bathroom. Because basically where that bathroom is where that gutter then comes out to the exterior, because it's an interior gutter. But anyway, because of that crack, they, instead of having to do tens of thousands of dollars of repair, they knew exactly where the crack was, and they can do a very localized repair. So local building company used our services for this, and they're like, John, you saved us like $10,000. Thank you. So that's a pretty cool thing. All right, this particular part of this expansion on a garage, definitely not supported the way that it's supposed to. There's a lot of issues wrong with this. You can't really see what's going on exactly in the photos, but basically they were using 4x4s to support one entire side of a cantilevered house. No, that's not how you do it. That's just not at all how you do it. So anyway, moving on. This fireplace, if the fireplace is, falling apart and totally deteriorated, then that means that it's probably not safe to operate. And this particular fireplace was missing pieces, was deteriorated. There were so many gaps in places for really hot gases and air to go where things could then catch on fire. Just not safe to operate. So this garage door, so unfortunate. So basically you have this massive garage, but because of the garage doors that they installed, you can't actually use these massive garages. So if we look at this picture right here, you can see that we have this garage door opener. And this garage door opener right now coming off of the garage door and then going to the garage door opener, that arm is basically maxed out. It has hit the garage door opener. And because that has happened, the garage door can only open this far. And I'm just like, what? How does this even happen? And so you can call the manufacturer and you can extend that. You can put in a different type of garage door opener. There's a lot of things that can be done. But golly, you have such a potential for a gorgeous, really tall, put in an RV, put in, a wakeboarding boat that still has that high bar up and doing its thing. But nope, none of it, because they put in the wrong garage door. So it's just one of those things that kind of just, cracks me up. So in general, in closing, this is basically everything that, not everything. These are the things that really stood out to us whenever we did our home inspections this past month. And I think it was pretty fun. We went out to Fifth Avenue Grill and got the whole family, everybody's, significant others out there. And we just had a really, really good time doing an in-service training, talking about a whole bunch of things. And then moving out to the Fifth Avenue Grill, and we all got some really, really good food. So if you're in the Frisco area, that's definitely a restaurant you guys need to try out. It's fantastic. So if you, as the viewer, have any questions, please give us a call, contact us. All of our information is at twomoosehomeinspections.com. If you'd like to schedule, you can schedule online. You can call our office, whatever works best for you. So thank you very much for watching this entire in-service training. If you made it this far, if you didn't, then you won't hear me say thank you because you didn't watch the whole thing. But this was a really, really good opportunity to just go through a bunch of issues, deficiencies, and just keep everybody fresh in their mind in the game of like, here's some things that I can find. Here's why it's important. Here's the underlying issues. And here's the philosophy behind why we need to call it out. So anyway, really cool. I'd like to say thank you so much for watching this video, and we'll see you on the next one.